Hey guys, welcome back to Father Fragrance. Today we're going to be talking about actually a pretty interesting topic if you ask me, not just in the fragrance community, but just kind of morally and ethically at large, I guess, really. This covers all kinds of different topics, but it is pretty unique in the fragrance community. And it's obviously something that has really taken it by storm in the recent years. So I think this is something we're talking about. Clones are like taking over, man. They're all over the place. And some people are all for it. Other people are vehemently against it. And I'm going to talk to you about kind of my feelings on it and whether I think that this is a good thing, a bad thing, or indifferent. I think this is a super interesting topic, and I know it's one that people love discussing. So I figured I'd let you know what I think. So before we get started, let's go ahead and cue that intro, and then let's get it, baby. All right, so basically the way I kind of wanted to structure this video is I wanted to kind of lay out some of the major objections or issues that people have with clone fragrances, dupes, whatever you want to call them. And then I'll kind of give you a background behind those, why people feel that way. And I'll let you know whether I agree with those things, with those objections, or if I believe that there's some kind of a rational explanation behind kind of ignoring those things or dismissing them a little bit, okay? So first thing we'll talk about is, how is this even legal, right? Like, there are so many things and so many laws and rules that exist to protect other people's property and ideas throughout the entire world, especially in our country, the US. There are many, many safeguards to kind of protect people's thoughts, ideas, products, right? So that they're not being taken and used by other folks. We like to kind of encourage people to utilize their creative muscles, right? Come up and innovate new ideas. And the best way to do that, at least one of the ways to kind of encourage that behavior, is to make sure that we protect those things to show that we do value creativity. So how on earth are people making these dupe fragrances, these clone fragrances? Well, believe it or not, fragrances are not able to have a copyright. The reason copyright exists is they're there to protect authorship, right? So we'll think about like arts, right? So that's probably the most common thing we're seeing with that is going to be, music, art, visual arts, performing arts, the media, right? Like movies, things like that. Like these kinds of things are regularly protected by copyright. All kinds of different forms of expression in art in particular. So why are fragrances not? Surely fragrances is an art form, right? Like they creating this beautiful piece of art. And I think most of us who enjoy fragrances or use them even a little bit would agree that there's kind of an art form to it, right? The fact of the matter is that this is the way that this has kind of been ruled is that they're looked at as actually more of a technical process, a combination of different chemicals that give you this kind of end result, not actually a performative art. So kind of interesting that that's the way that these are looked at, but that is what it is. Things that are protected though, right, for fragrances is going to be the kind of trademark stuff. So like brand names, right? What I mean by that is that you can't take a designer fragrance. So we'll take like, let's say Burberry, for instance, right? And then I make a dupe or clone of it and then also call it Burberry Hero, Burberry London, Burberry for him, right? Like you can't just mimic those. So those things are protected. The companies are able to protect the name of their company, the name of the product itself, the bottle. We're going to talk about that a little bit. There's some interesting things about that. And there are some who've gotten in trouble with that recently. So we'll cover that as well. So bottle shape, bottle design, and then any kind of, trademarked items as well. And that one's obvious, right? So these are the kinds of things that are protected for fragrances. So like I was just talking about, like there actually have been some clone houses who have gotten in trouble for that exact issue, messing with bottle design that is way too similar to the original, okay? So the real house that was really getting caught up with that was Maison Alhambra, which is like a kind of a sister or daughter house of Lattafa that literally exists only to pump out millions upon millions of clone fragrances that are attempting to be as dead on the original as possible. So much so that they were basically copying and pasting the original bottle designs of the fragrance that they were inspired by, right? That's the term you'll hear a lot. And so I do have one on hand right now, and I'll kind of show you that, and then I'll go through some of the others and why they got in trouble, and you'll see it immediately, okay? All right, so this right here is Maison Alhambra's Ibene. I think that's how you say it, I don't know. So if you look at this, and if you're at all familiar with what this could be, it immediately resonates. This right here is a clone of YSL's Baby Cat. If you've ever seen the bottle, you know immediately that's what it's trying to do, or one of a handful, right? So if you haven't seen it, I'm gonna put it up right here for you, and you can take a look at that, and you're like, okay, I see what's going on here, right? The one that really got them in trouble is their Tom Ford lines. So they started doing all of the private blends from Tom Ford. And dude, when I tell you that these were like the most ridiculous thing ever, it was hilarious. So here's a couple that I can think of right off the bat. So you have Tom Ford's Tobacco Vanille, and then Maison Alhambra Tobacco Touch. Tom Ford Tuscan Leather, Maison Alhambra Toscano Leather. Tom Ford Oud Wood, Maison Alhambra Woody Oud. So as you can see, they weren't really trying to even pretend here. And they actually got into some trouble for that. So recently they had to redo all the bottles and change all the names. Those are some of the things that actually are protected for fragrances. So as you probably noticed, the fragrance itself is not one of the things that I listed there. That is how these other companies are able to go ahead and take the scent DNA, the scent profile from another company who created it, designed it, and then they can copy it. Right? They can get as close to it as they possibly can, and they can't really get in trouble for that. So the reason I bring that up is just to basically lay out the fact that what these fragrance houses, these clone houses, these dupe houses are doing is perfectly legal. But the question here is not, is it legal, right? We know the answer to that. Otherwise, they would never be able to do that. But should they be able to? That's the real question that we're looking at here. So that's what we're going to examine here. So do you remember how I mentioned in the beginning that we generally reward people for creativity, for innovative thinking, for creating new things, right? And I would say that that is true. And that is part of the biggest objection behind clone houses. And the reason why that is there is some kind of an inherent value in creating things. And if these clone houses exist to do nothing other than take somebody else's idea, recreate it, and then sell it on, pennies on the dollar to kind of undercut them, some people have issues with that. So some people just place lots and lots of value on that creative aspect. And I gotta be honest with you, I feel for that argument. Like that is definitely a real thing to object to, right? So the reason for that is the effort, the creativity, the kind of artfulness, the true effort comes from actually dreaming up and creating that fragrance, okay? But here's the thing, I think that feeling is really being overridden by something much, much more important to the masses out there. And it's just gonna come down to money, bro. Like, let's just be honest. We're talking about normal people, everyday Joes that have families to raise, that have, bills to pay, right? And with all of the cost of living increasing, can you really blame someone for trying to find some shortcuts? I know that I can't, okay? Like, I'm always somebody looking to save a buck, man. You can call me cheap, I don't care. But even the smallest amount, I'm always looking to do that, right? Because money is something that I've worked hard to earn, right? So I'm not just gonna willy-nilly toss it around. And because these clone houses are so much cheaper, you're getting something that's very similar to a fragrance that you love at a significant discount. It is very hard to ignore that. When eggs cost 50 cents a piece, every egg is, a dozen eggs is $6 right now. That's wild, right? Like, this money is gotta be spent more wisely in today's time than ever. So that's why I think that objection is not the best in a modern sense, simply because people are having a hard time affording these luxury items. And look, I know we like to pretend like fragrances are a must-have. It's absolutely a luxury item, man. Like, we're talking about alcohol water that smells good. This is not an essential. It's not something you need to live. So that extra money can be spent somewhere else. They're going to do it. and I understand that. Another common objection is the quality of the ingredients that are being used. A cheap fragrance means cheaper materials, and so therefore that means a worse product or maybe something bad for you, right? And you know, that's not that's a realistic assumption to make, but it's actually not one that's always true. And here's some things to consider about that, right? A lot of clone houses are utilizing pretty much the same exact ingredients as designers are, and even some niche houses, to be quite frank. Now, don't get me wrong, you're gonna have plenty that utilize, plenty of niche houses that utilize much higher quality ingredients, and they are apparent. Like, you can pick those things up pretty easily, and that's why they cost so much more. But most designers though, these are really similar ingredients. Like, they're using a lot of synthetics as well. In fact, they have to use synthetics because so many of the natural ingredients that were used in days past are illegal now. So the ingredients are not vastly different. So for that objection, I actually don't accept that one whatsoever. There's really not much of a difference. Now, how can they use these same ingredients and be so much cheaper? Well, they're cutting out all kinds of additional costs. Most of these clone houses, they're not going to retailers, right? So there's no middleman. They're going like direct to consumer. They're not paying for sales associates. They're not paying nothing, right? Maybe they send some products to some influencers. That's about it, right? So that's really where they make up for that. And that's how they're capable of keeping that cost down. And then another one that's very common that you'll hear, clone houses are trash. They don't smell anything like their original counterpart, and they're a waste of money. Here's another one that I actually just don't accept actually at all. I've talked about this a little bit before if you've seen some of my other videos. Clone houses in the past definitely did suck. Dupes were not good. They were very obvious, very harsh, synthetic-y. And you still get some that are like that, but I gotta tell you, some of them these days are just so good. And then I always say that shopping for clones one-to-one is really not the way to do it. To me, they just gotta be good enough. And the reason for that is the vast price difference. So if you find a clone fragrance that is trying to, mimic a very popular designer, a niche fragrance that you enjoy, and you get your hands on it and you smell it and it's only like 90% close to the original, to me, that's an absolute win. Because for the most part, these clone fragrances are going for like 20 to 50 bucks and sometimes even less than that. And they're copying fragrances that are 10 times that price sometimes, right? Like 10 times the price at 90% of the scent profile. To me, pretty good bargain. That's the way I look at clone fragrances. If they're good enough, then they're good enough. I know that sounds ridiculous, but there are a lot of like designer niche snobs out there who will cut up clones because they're not identical to them. Well, at 10% the price, I would imagine it wouldn't. And it probably shouldn't, right? Like if you're charging me 250 bucks, it better be better than the $25 version, okay? Like that's the way to think about it, okay? Like for instance, these guys right here, right? So I have Liquid Brune over here from French Avenue, and then this is Lattafa's Kamrakawa. These two are clones, but maybe two of the most popular going right now. These things are every bit as good as the original. And then on this one, I actually like a little more, to be quite honest with you. This runs for like 40, 50 bucks. This is $25, a lot of places, and they perform better than their original a lot of times. So I just don't accept that these guys are trash all the time, no matter what. There's a handful out there that are fantastic, and then most of them, especially from your more popular clone houses, are good enough and they're priced fantastic, and that's all you can really ask for. And just one last thing on clone houses and their like non-creativity thing, like most of these clone houses actually do have a handful of their own kind of original scents, or at least do inspired by styles. So they're not all one-to-ones, or they're not even attempting to. They just kind of borrow some of the scent DNA and then put a twist on it. That is, to me, not much different than finding a recipe alike and changing that up a little bit. And the other thing about that is like designer houses and niche houses have been doing that forever, right? Like they all kind of do that with one another anyways, and nobody really gets upset about that. Think about how many freaking Aventus style DNA fragrances there are out there. Like it's insane how many are out there, and they're from designer houses, right? Or from niche houses. The same thing is true for like Baccarat Rouge 540, dude. Like how many versions of that exist in the world? And those are coming from designer and niche houses as well. It's just another thing that is just like, they like to crack down on some of these guys, and especially the Middle Eastern ones. But honestly, man, it's not much different than what a lot of these other designers and niche houses are doing anyways. So it's just not something that really holds much weight to me. All right, so that's kind of covers most of the major objections I've run into when I kind of discuss this topic with other people in the community. And as you can see, I just don't see those arguments as very convincing. The best out there, the best objection by far is the value we place on creativity and designing, right? Like, I understand that completely. That makes so much sense to me. But you know, I'm not somebody who has brand loyalty. I'm not like sticking up for big corporations or anything like that for the most part in this. So if somebody else is making a similar or better product for less money, I cannot fault anybody for going after those. So at the end of the day, for me, clone houses, clone fragrances, totally fine. I think they're a fantastic way to enjoy fragrances without spending a ton of money. And as you can see, I already showed you a handful. I own a handful. I own more designer niche fragrances than I do clones, but that's not because I think clone houses are bad. I actually like them, otherwise I wouldn't buy them at all. So thank you guys so much for watching this one and listening to me kind of get up on my pedestal and, you know, wax philosophical a little bit on a pretty interesting topic, I think. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you didn't, I'm sorry, but I'm glad that you stuck around this long. Anyways, what do you think about this kind of topic? Do you think clone houses are okay? Do you think clone fragrances, dupes, inspired by is fine? Or do you think it's abhorrent, disgusting, horrible? Let me know down in the comments. Also, let me know if there's anything you thought I missed here. Maybe you've heard some other objections that I didn't cover, or if you thought I maybe misspoke or said something incorrect. Just let me know down in the comments, man. I'm more than happy to get down there with y'all and hash that out. Thanks again for visiting. This is Father Fragrance. I'm Tyler, and I can't wait to see y'all again next time. In the meantime, stay smelly, y'all.